When repairing an ARO Air Operated Diaphragm Pump, be sure to always use authentic ARO service parts. Today we are going to be using the ARO Air Section Service Kit 637397, which includes all of the appropriate seals to repair your air section or air motor on the pump, as well as the fluid section repair kit or service kit 637396-AA, which is going to include the 2 diaphragms, 4 balls, and proper seals to repair your fluid section of the diaphragm pump. As well as when repairing an ARO Air Operated Diaphragm Pump, you always want to be sure to have your operator's manual handy, which is included in each repair kit. Okay, prior to assembly, you want to make sure that you have of course, your proper PPE. So today we have safety glasses. We're going to start by assembling the center body. And again, you always want to make sure that you have your operator's manual handy. So we're going to start with the center body. And the operator's manual will give you a step-by-step instructions on how to assemble, either written or an exploded view like this. So we have our 2 air caps. We are going to start with using our 2 U-cups. Now you want to make sure when installing your U-cups that the lips are in the proper orientation, which your operator's manual will tell you. In this case, we want our lips facing down, facing the air side of the fluid cap. That way, when it's installed with the lips facing down, when the air chamber is pressurized, these lips will flare and hold a seal in your air chamber. Per the operator's manual, you want to lubricate all your seals with your grease that comes in the kit. This actually sits on a little seat, so you want to make sure that you get it in there all the way. There we go. We'll put in our second one. You want to make sure that you get enough lube on there. It's better to have too much than too little. Again, lips facing down towards the inside of the air cap. You want to make sure that you get it in that seat. Now you want to go ahead and take your bushing. On all your hard parts within the pump, you want to examine visually, make sure there's no scars or scratches on them, especially on the bushing here on the internal tube. So that looks good. So we're going to put that on top of that U-cup. We're going to take our center body, or our center block, and install the pilot valve. Put a little bit of grease on here. Actually, a good amount of grease. The seals there. Now we're going to take our sensor pins, our 2 sensor pins. You're going to want to make sure that you put this in the right orientation. You can see you have the head of the pin on the inside of the valve block, or I'm sorry, of the center block. Do that on both of those. Now we're going to take our 2 Y325-123 O-rings. Put some lube on there. Whoops, we lost our pin, but that's okay. We're going to put this on the outside. There we go. And as you're doing this, you want to make sure, again, we mentioned a clean work area. That way you do not get any debris on your components, if at all possible. Just feed that around, there we go. 2 pieces of your Y325-202. Lubricate. And you can see here the area in which they seat. So we're going to put that in there like that. Make sure it seats in there. Lubricate that. Same on the second piece. Now we're ready to install. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to pop this back out. You can see here the bushing in which it sits. You want to get a visual on that too. Make sure it's in good shape and that there's no scratches or scarring. We'll go ahead and put that back in there. Be careful when you do this that you do not pinch your O-ring here. When that comes off track and you pinch it, you can cut it. There we go. Pops in place just like that. Same with the other side. Make sure they move freely, in which they do. Now take your air cap. We want to make sure that we put this all in the right way. So we're going to have our pressurized exhaust port here and here. And we want to make sure that that port and your sensor pin lines up with the port on the air cap. Pressurized exhaust port, sensor pin port. I'm going to put this back in here, move that aside, and before we do that, we're going to pop on our seals. Move that up nice and good. Take your 2 Y325-114 O-rings. And that's going to go right around your, to seal your pressurized and exhaust port there. And we want to make sure that we do this on both sides. I'm actually going to switch here so I can make sure I get this on the right side. I'm going to place this over here, and we can see our sensing pin matches that port there, and our pressurized exhaust port will match that port there. So we're going to lay that down. Be careful not to lose track of your seals, that they stay in place. You can see we do have some roll pins here, and the same on the bottom side to help keep this in place. Now we're going to put the seals on the top here. Sure you get that. There's an internal track that seal sits right in. I want to make sure it's all the way in the track. You want to make sure that your U-cup remains in place. And again, your your pilot sensing pin lines up at that port, and your exhaust port lines up with the exhaust port. There we go. We're going to slide that aside just for a moment. When assembling these three pieces, your manual calls out 242 Loctite. So we're going to want to make sure that we apply that. So let's follow the manual, and we're going to make sure we have our O-rings in place, which is our 96292. There's 8 per pump. So we're going to lube those. You can see we have our proper hardware with our washer. We're going to slide that seal. Be careful not to cut it. Slide that right up underneath that washer. We're going to do that for all 4 bolts. We're going to take Loctite 242. This is kind of tricky. I'm just going to slide this off the table slightly, and we want to make sure that it doesn't come apart. And the best way, or an easy way to do this is, and of course you want to make sure, depending on what model you're working with, if you need steel-toe shoes, to wear those if needed. In this case, we're dealing with a lighter product, polypropylene, but still, safety's first. You want to make sure that you're wearing steel toes if needed. We got a little bit of Loctite on there. We're going to let it roll around. Take this. We're going to go underneath, right up through, you can see there. I'm going to let that sit just for a moment. Slide it back on there so that bolt doesn't come out. And I'm going to get these 4 already pre-lubed so we're ready to go, because our hands are going to be full. We're going to slide that back off the table, but oops, came off. We want to make sure our gasket is still in place, which it is. We'll put that back on there. And then slide this, make sure you have a good seal, back off, but don't let your bolt drop. All right, now we pushed it back all the way through. Take your O-ring. We're going to try to get it on there the best you can, because we're going to thread our nut on there, and we want to make sure we have our threads visible so it can grab. Get it started. There we go, you have it started. We'll put that down. We're going to grab our 13 millimeter socket. May need an extension here just to be safe. There we go. And we're just going to hold it for now just to get it tight here. There we go. Now you can see we have our bolt coming up. We're going to have 2 coming up from one side and 2 going down from the other, diagonal from each other. So we're going to rotate this. Apply your Loctite. Turn that around a little bit. There we go. So we have that together. Now we're going to refer back to our operator's manual. We want to make sure to check and see if there is any torque specification for that particular nut and bolt assembly. Let's see. And there is not, so we'll make sure we get them nice and mechanically tight or snug. Grab your other ratchet wrench along with the extension and your other 13mm socket. We're going to want to hold one end and tighten the other. We're going to do it in a star pattern, kind of like here, 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 and here, just to make sure we get a good seal all the way around. Just a good habit to get into. There we go. Okay. Set that aside. Next, we're going to install our diaphragm rod and our two diaphragms. Take your diaphragm rod, and you can see we cleaned out all the excess Loctite. Go to your your fluid section service kit and grab your diaphragms. So we'll go ahead and do. So we're going to install our new diaphragms. In this case, these diaphragms are Santoprene. They're cream color. And as mentioned in the disassembly video, we have our pre-installed, or our molded-in O-rings here and here. You can also see that on the inside, or the air side of the diaphragm, it's identified. You can see air side. You want to make sure that that air side is facing your air cap. So you want to make sure again that your air side of the diaphragm is facing your air cap. We're going to take our diaphragm nut, and per your operator manual specifications, in this case it tells us to put some grease on the facing head here. But anytime you do that, you want to make sure that the grease you're using is chemically compatible with the product that's being pumped, in case any of it gets within your product. We're going to put a little bit on the get it covered nice and evenly around the head there. Just going to set that one aside. I'm going to do the other one where we have it here. A little bit more. Once you applied your grease on your diaphragm nut, start from the wet side of the diaphragm. Again, the air side is identified in the back. You might kind of thread that in. It threads right on there. There we go. Take your Loctite 271, apply it to your threads. Again, not too heavy, but you want to make sure you get enough on there to cover your threads. Which you can see here, we have a beveled edge inside there, or chamfered edge to where the O-ring seats. And then also a chamfered edge or a beveled edge on the side there. It's a round smooth edge. You want to make sure that that round smooth edge fits against the diaphragm. That way, when it flexes, it doesn't cut the diaphragm. Take your diaphragm rod, thread it on there, get it started. This does need torque, but we're going to wait until we get both sides on. Slide that in. We're going to turn this on its side. We're going to do the same thing on this side. Thread that in place. There we go. Take your diaphragm washer, again with the O-ring groove facing the molded in O-ring and the smooth rounded side facing the diaphragm so it does not cut again when the diaphragm flexes. We're going to apply our Loctite 271. Oop, there we go. Get it on the threads there. Okay. You want to make sure your diaphragm washer doesn't fall off. Line that up and get it started. Okay. So now go back to the operator's manual. These item 6 diaphragm nuts call for torque specifications of 25 to 30 foot-pounds. We're going to go ahead and grab our 2 1.25" wrenches. We're going to tighten that nice and snug before we use our torque wrenches. It's a good habit to get into. It saves the torque wrenches a little bit to get whatever you're torquing nice and snug before you have to use your torque wrench with your standard wrenches. Now, we're going to take our torque wrench, our 1.25" socket. Just going to use this here so that doesn't roll away. There we go. We have our torque wrench. Now use a standard wrench on the other side. And we're going to set our torque wrenches between 25 and 30 foot-pounds. I want to get a good grip on the left side here with this wrench. You don't want that slipping, as well as with the torque wrench. So to do so, I'm actually going to flip this around, use the table as a help. So when I'm pushing against the diaphragm nut here, that wrench is pushing against the table, and I don't have to have a better hand on the center body itself. There we go, it clicked. I'm going to rotate this around. We're going to do the same on the other end. Again, we want to make sure we torque both sides properly. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that again. I like to do it twice on each side, just to make sure we get a good tight. From this point, we're going to move to the assembly of our fluid caps and manifolds. We're going to take our fluid cap. As mentioned, you always want to make sure that your arrow is pointing up. With your center body, you always want to make sure that your label is towards the top, like this. For the manual, you can see for today's demonstration, we pre-applied the anti-seize. But with stainless hardware, per the manual, you want to make sure that you use anti-seize on all your threads. I'm going to push this through the back. Oops. See, I told you I'm not perfect. I only know one man who's perfect, and it's not me. I used the wrong size bolt, so there we go. get one started here. And one caddy corner from it to get that held in place. It's key that we do this before we install our major valve. As you can see, the bolts that we installed would be impossible to go through with your major valve assembly in the way. Okay, from this point, we're going to move to our other side. Again, we want to make sure that our arrow is facing up and that we follow the same orientation with our label on top, or our nameplate, as well as the other fluid cap on the other side. There we go. One side there. Okay. All right, so at this point, we're going to take our wrench, our ratchet wrench with our 13 millimeter socket, and we're going to go ahead and get these nice and snug before we torque them. You want to make sure that you follow your operator's manual. You can see here the torque sequence. It's just like changing a tire. You want to go in a star pattern so you can get an even seal all the way around. So we can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Probably couldn't see with my finger in the way, but you get the idea. All right. So now, while we're on this side, we're going to look at our manual, confirm the torque specs, and it's telling me item 29 nut requires a torque spec of 10 to 12 foot-pounds. Again, you want to make sure that you use your star pattern. Okay, so we went through all 10 bolts. For best practices, it's always good to go a second time around, which I typically do. Okay, now we're going to move to the other side. We're going to turn it around. We're going to remove this. Remember, our torque wrench is already set, so we're just going to set this here momentarily. Okay. Go back to our torque wrench. Again, follow our star pattern. Okay. Again, the same as the other side. We're going to go one more time around quick. Okay. Set that aside. Now we're going to move to our inlet and outlet manifolds. Remember, on the bottom, the balls sit within the fluid cap. So we're going to go to our fluid section rebuild kit here. We're going to drop in our new Sandoprene balls, again, which are cream in color. One on each side. Then we're going to go with our O-rings for the seal here. Set this aside for now. We're going to look at our exploded view of our manual. And I should have told you right off the bat But as we look at our O-rings and our individual parts, each part is identified with an item number and then also a key. For example, this 131 towards it, which tells us there's a torque spec, which the key is down here, and also a 2, which tells us, we go to our key, a 2 is applied Loctite 242. So we're going to look at our item number 19 and 33 O-rings to see if we have any lubrication specs, and in this case we do not. So going to open our kit, go to our O-ring pack, 93280, 4 pieces. Again, this is a Santoprene repair kit, so your O-ring part numbers will vary, as well as your ball and diaphragm part numbers. We're going to apply one here. Make sure you get it to seat right on the edge in there, inside. And if you order the repair kit without the seats and you're not replacing the seats, you can see in this case that our seats have a beveled edge on the internal here. And you can see the track where the larger of the 2 O-rings sits on the outside, which is in here. Now, real quick, a good indicator, to check to see if you have a bad ball or seat. You want to place your ball on top of your seat and hold it up to maybe some light and look underneath. If you hold it up to light and look underneath, you can kind of see, look around, see if you have a good seal. If you can see light, it's an indicator that you have a bad seal. Or you can even put some of the fluid, a specific fluid around it, as long as it's compatible with the material of the pump, and to see if it leaks through. So we're going to put our balls back in there, put our seat in the proper orientation, and again, the seats are hard parts, so you want to examine them if you do not order the repair kit with the seats within the kit. Okay, so we're good there. Now we're going to take our 2 out of our 4 pieces of the 93279 O-ring, which is item 33. We just installed item 19. We're going to apply one here and here. And again, you want to make sure that it fits within the groove here. We're going to set those aside. Now we're going to take our manifold. And you want to make sure that you install it with the same orientation in which you took it apart, with the fluid inlet facing the right direction. In this case, put it like this. You want to make sure that your O-ring stays in track. Now we're going to take our bolts, which again, we pre-applied anti-seize compound because we're dealing with stainless steel threads or hardware per our manual specifications. I'm going to get them started here. So at that point, again, we're going to take our 13 millimeter socket with our extension. You can see we're going to need the extension to tighten the bolts between those holes on the feet there. You can get them snug. Okay, now we're going to take our torque wrench back to our operator's manual. In this case, it tells us to item number 26 torque to 10 to 12 foot-pounds again. So our torque wrench is already set. Now again, we're going to want to do this twice. Do all 8 bolts. And then we'll move to the top manifold. Once we finished installing the bottom manifold, we're going to go to our top manifold. Go back to our repair kit. You can see in our repair kit we're going to have a lot of additional parts left over on the fluid kit. Reason being is because in this particular repair we repaired both the air section and the fluid section. If you're wanting just to repair the fluid section, it does come with the proper seals that we're going to need internally when removing our diaphragms. So we're going to take our last remaining 2 balls. As mentioned, our balls on the top sit within the manifold and not the fluid cap. We're going to take our larger 93280 O-ring, place that inside. Take our 2 seats. Again, we want to make sure that the larger seat in which the larger O-ring sits faces the inside. And again, give your seat a good visual to make sure it's not scarred or damaged. Pop that into place. Same on the other side. Now we're going to take our last remaining 93279 O-rings, the last 2 pieces. Make sure they sit in the track there. In this case, when we put this back on, we want to make sure we don't lose our O-rings. So since what we're pumping is chemically compatible with our lube that we've been using, I'm going to put just a little dab on there to get my O-ring to stick into place. Just a little tip, if you can do it. If not, a lot of applications you can't, because what you're pumping is sensitive and we can't get any type of grease or oil, not oil, I'm sorry, but grease within your product. Now remember, you want to install it with the fluid port in the same orientation in which you disassembled the pump. So in this case, it's facing the front. We're going to put in our hardware, get it started here. Again, not too tight. We'll have the torque wrench torque it down to the proper spec. When dealing with plastics, you don't want to over torque because you can damage your threads or crack your manifold or your fluid cap. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. Okay. Now, same as the bottom, our item 26 bolts, torque 10 to 12 foot-pounds. And again, we have our torque wrench already set. And again, you want to make sure you do this twice around on all 8 bolts. Once we properly have all of our fasteners torqued, we will go ahead and move to the major valve assembly. We're going to set the pump aside just for a moment. We're going to go ahead and grab our valve block and start with our major valve spool. So you see your spool here, you typically want to check it, give it a quick examination to see if there's any scarring or debris anywhere. This one looks pretty clean. So we'll go ahead and grab our 2 U-cups. Now per the operator's manual, we want to make sure that our U-cups, the lip seals are facing each other. So we'll go ahead and lube these up. sure that you don't have a twist on you. There we go. Make sure you don't cut it. There we go. So we got our top seal on. Move to the bottom seal. Okay, again, make sure the lips are facing each other. Back it there. Nope. It's not twisted. Lips are facing each other. Now go ahead and take your valve block, your spool, insert it into this bottom end of the valve block with the large end of the spool facing in. Now we'll take our cap. There's a seal that we're going to apply here. You can see the track for it. Okay. Put that gasket or that seal, put that seal right in the track there. Make sure it's in place. Looks good. Now we're going to see an air port down there at the bottom. You want to make sure that you match it up with the port on the valve block. Okay, once you have your plug on, go ahead and grab your two plates. Both of these plates are the same, so you can use either plate on either end of the major valve. Grab your 4 longitudinal bolts, and you can see on the threads there we applied the lunar plate grease that comes in the air section service kit on the end of these 4 bolts per the operator's manual. Grab that here. Okay, take your 4 nuts, and we're going to thread these on hand tight, but try to get them secure as you can. There is a torque spec for these nuts, which is 35 to 40 inch-pounds. So that's not a whole lot. So we don't want to over-torque these. So we're going to get them, there we go, nice and snug. And then we'll take our torque wrench and tighten them up. Okay, so we're going to grab our torque wrench, 10 millimeter socket. Per the operator's manual, the torque specs, again, are 35 to 40 inch-pounds. So we're going to go ahead and set this. Right now we are at, there we go, 40 inch-pounds. Take your 10 millimeter open box end wrench on the top, and then we're going to torque the bottom end, the nut on the bottom. Listen for the click. It's not a whole lot of torque. There we go. I'm just go back at them again and get them twice. You don't have to, but it's a good practice to get into. There we go. Okay. Set your torque wrench aside. Now we're going to move to our insert in our D valve, which I call it D valve. The manual has a more technical term for it, which is going to be valve insert, valve plate. So we'll take our valve insert and our valve plate, and you have to pay attention here. One side or one surface on the valve plate has a polished side to it, which you want to make sure that your insert travels against that polished side. The parts manual, the manual will tell you to make sure that your side with the part number on it, on this particular model it has a part number on it. Other models it'll have a little dot in the corner, depending on what model you're working on. Grab a little bit of grease here. That part number on the plate needs to be facing the center body on the pump. So this should be our polished side. I'm going to put some lube on there, some of that grease. You can see it has a nice pull to it, as opposed to the other side. It doesn't stick as well. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to insert our ceramic insert into the major valve body. Again, you want to make sure that this D, and when I say D, I mean this, you can see the inside here, how it has that D-shape indentation in it, is facing the plate. You don't want to have it in backwards or your pump won't operate. So we're going to place this with the indent facing up. Polished side of the plate is facing the insert. We're going to take this. You can see here, this is the outside which faces the center body. You can see a little, it's kind of hard to see, but a little indentation there, which lines up with the indentation here for this airport. So we're going to put, your kit will come with two almost identical gaskets here or seals here, but they're a little bit different. This repair kit is used on multiple pumps, so it depends on what pump you're working with. For today, we're going to want to use the gasket with the little holes in the corner. As you can see, this one does not have those holes in the corner. Oops, we got to put a little bit of lube on there. There we go. Now again, you want to make sure you line that indentation, or that little slot there, with the slot down here on your major valve. Go ahead and pop that into place. Take your next gasket here, and you can see how that tab lines up with that airport there in the bottom. Make sure that that seal fits right into place. Okay, we'll put on our final gasket, part number 96171, or our final seal. get it in the right orientation, right in the track there. Grab your diaphragm pump. Take your quick dump valves. You can see here. You do not want to forget these. Make sure you put them in there properly so they seat in your exhaust port there. There we go. Now take your 5mm Allen wrench. You can see here we have our 6 of our bolts with 6 washers, and we actually applied the anti-seize compound already per the operator's manual. You want to make sure that your bolt hole pattern lines up. You can see we have 2 towards the top here, 1 towards the bottom, same on the other side, 2 towards the top, 1 towards the bottom. You want to match that pattern on your valve block before you put that on. There we go. These do have a torque spec as well, so we want to get those down snug. The torque spec is 35 to 40 inch-pounds, so we do not want to crank them down too tight. Grab your torque wrench with your extension and a 5mm Allen head. The torque requirements for this particular bolt here is 35 to 40 inch-pounds, which we already have our torque wrench spec to. We're going to go ahead here. Okay, we're going to do this one more time. There we go. Okay. Okay, we have finished the reassembly of our ARO 1-inch non-metallic diaphragm pump. Behind the scenes, we went ahead and installed our muffler. You want to make sure that you do install your muffler before you put that back into the application if it requires it. This particular unit did not have a muffler when we started working on it, but we did have one handy, so we went ahead and installed that. This completes our demonstration. If you have any questions, please contact ARO Technical Support at 1-800-495-0276, or you can email us at arotechsupport@irco.com. Thank you and have a great day.